This past week, we have been reading from St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. Paul feels compelled to write this letter because there was a faction at the time actively undermining his efforts in the area. They were telling the churches there that the way to win God's approval was to live a life of meticulous observance of Mosaic law, piously follow all the established ritual, social, and moral regulations, including food laws and ceremonial washing and the like. Do that, and you will win God's favor. Paul's letter is telling the Galatians, telling us, that it's not quite that simple. Now, while Paul would agree that we do not have a license to sin and that the law has its place, he offers the Galatians a more profound insight into the higher designs of God found in Christ Jesus and the supernatural gifts of the Spirit. That if we think God is just some disciplinarian in the sky, that we are way missing the point. Indeed, God is operating a lot deeper than the law, and the covenantal promises that he makes to us are far more wonderful than we can ever imagine. But imagine we must, and we're filled with love and joy when we do so. But to get us to understand this vital point, Paul employs a single word. It's a crucial word by which we must live our lives. It's a single word by which we are justified, that is, made righteous. It's a single word that was repeated 7 times in yesterday's first reading to the Galatians, and 6 times again today, 13 times in 2 days. And you will hear this word again next week, Monday through Wednesday, when we conclude hearing the Galatians. So if Paul repeats this word 13 times in 2 days, we should open our hearts and take notice. If you haven't already figured it out, that word is faith. Faith, belief, confidence, and trust in something. Now that's fine for a dictionary definition, but what does it mean exactly? And how should we respond? Well, Paul shows us the way. Faith, specifically Christian faith, aligned with the ideals and the example of the life of Jesus. We Christians contemplate the mystery of God and his grace and seek to know and become obedient to him. For us Christians, faith is not static and immovable, but alive and dynamic, inspiring us to learn more about God and to grow in faith all the days of our life. Indeed, the wisest theologians are always learning and growing in their faith. It's the faith of Abraham, mentioned by Paul yesterday. Abraham repeatedly demonstrated faith, even when it was illogical by human standards to do so. Abraham was righteous, not because he followed the law, but because he was faithful and obedient and said yes, like the Blessed Mother, which we celebrated yesterday with Our Lady of Victory. And we are Abraham's descendants, we are, when we share that faith. And it's the faith of us here today, who will soon receive the greatest gift imaginable, the source and summit of our faith, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. Yeah, that kind of faith. And it's the faith to get our hands dirty, to forgive when it's hard, to love unconditionally, to take up our cross, to endure and embrace suffering so as to get closer to Christ. That's the kind of faith we're talking about. The faith to know that God is infinitely greater than anything I can possibly conceive and simply isn't going to conform to my feeble-minded human concepts of his nature and purpose. But perhaps most importantly, faith is knowing with certainty that this is a God who keeps his promises and remains faithful to the eternal covenant. And that is key, for all of our faith stems from that single promise of his. And that fills us with hope, because with this faith, marked by words and actions, we are justified, and those he justifies, he glorifies.